Hi, Bill Yannick here, ConnexFM CEO. Welcome to the Daily Grind. Today on the Daily Grind, we're going to talk vendor management with a subject matter expert and facility manager with Smile Doctors. He's Jason Nunn. Jason, welcome to the Daily Grind.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Bill. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, both Jason and I are in the DFW area today, so we're basically yelling at each other across the highways, but great to see you virtually here, Jason. Quick intro of who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is Jason Nunn, a facilities manager for Smile Doctors Orthodontics. I started my facilities career with movie theaters, and then moved on to storage units. And from storage units, went to restaurants, and from restaurants, I landed in the orthodontist industry. So I've got a great, facilities background. For major corporations. I think I learned a little bit at every one of these places.
Okay, so let's dig into some more specific questions. So you obviously you're an FM and multi-site FM. That's the heart and soul of ConnexFM as well. But you have to deal with brokers when you're going out and finding new vendors. How do you manage that process? Some of the challenges, the good, bad, and otherwise.
Well, we mentioned brokers when we first start this conversation, and when we go to a with the Connex, when we go to Connex, and most of the time we are seeing brokers there, and there are a lot of wonderful brokers in the industry, and I'd say, maybe this is not the best thing to say, but I'd say it's a necessary evil, right? The brokers can make your job much easier in the facilities world, and I would say that you absolutely want to have a broker on your side at 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4, right, depending on how much of the country that your locations are. But when it comes to having vendors, it's okay to have brokers, right? But don't stop there. Don't just have all brokers, right? I think what you want to do is you want to find some vendors that are going to help with what you are. So you may have specialty equipment, so you can have specialty vendors. But when you get into other things such as paint, flooring, landscaping, and plumbing, electrical, some of the main trades, the brokers are pretty helpful. But I think it's important for any FM to have brokers in their back pocket, but also take it a step further and say, instead of just handing off the work to a broker and letting them do the work, why don't I bring in a local vendor or a regional vendor, so that that we can better manage this, so we can manage our costs, and then that way you don't have all your eggs in one basket for. But I would say, looking for vendors, a couple places you can look. If you are doing a lot of site visits, feel free to stop into the business next door to yours. A lot of times you can just have a conversation and say, hey, who does your HVAC over here? You get a name and a number, and then it's a lead, right? Sometimes you're just filling up your gas tank, and there's always or you're at Chick-fil-A having some lunch, and there's an HVAC van sitting right there in the parking lot. Write those numbers down. Reach out. It's a good way to find local vendors. I said, so you got the search function, in Service Channel. You got when site visits, sometimes just seeing them across the street, when you're in your daily travels. And, all the thing is when you go to the conventions, you can meet other FMs. And when you meet these other FMs, a lot of times you can just get on the phone and say, hey, look, I need somebody in Colorado. Who do you use? Right. And so there's more than one way to staff your facilities without just brokers, right?
Interesting. Well, you bring up a great dynamic. Of course, I'm a little biased toward ConnexFM, but we often talk either on the supplier side or on the FM side. Mingling with your peers and sharing that information is so important, and we hope you do it in person and with our events and the like. And I also love your sometimes the simplest answer works, right? Go ask the neighbor what they are using if there's someone in the area that has a great reputation. Interesting stuff. Okay. So the unique nature for our audience out there, I'm not telling them anything they don't know. Multi-site FM, normally large geographic areas, a large number of individual facilities. So it's hard to cover down. You end up with vendor voids, right? Where you may not have a certain particular vendor. How do you manage that?
So having a broker is a great answer to that solution, right? Because then you have what we refer to as a backstop. But you are going to have voids. Right now I'm currently managing a almost a 400 site footprint, so I know that there's voids everywhere in there. You cannot possibly have a vendor in every trade, at every site, and maybe you do, but You're gonna have voids for whatever reason. Some maybe a guy you were using retired. Could be any number of reasons why you have voids, or a vendor that you had a lot of faith in. They were doing a really good job, and then suddenly now they're just not so good. But you're gonna have voids. So right, I think what you need to do though is to find those voids. You have to spend some time to identify your voids, because if you do this in advance, when there's a need for a plumber in a remote town, that you don't get stuck and saying, oh, I got to use a broker here, and I know it's going to cost me twice as much, right? So you want to identify your voids, and there's a couple ways that you can do that. A lot of times, I think the best way that you can identify you have a void is when you get a decline. If you kick out a work order and the vendor declines the work order, that's a good opportunity to say, why was it declined? Is it that the not to exceed, or is it the distance is not right, or they just can't make the ETA? You look at your declines, and that's going to maybe tell you that you have a void, because then you'll say, oh my goodness, I don't have a plumber here in this particular city. And I think at that point, you got to make a note. You got to have a little notebook, as a facilities manager, you got to have a little notebook on the side. It just says that, when you come across something, before you get taken in another direction, make a little note, and you can come back to it later when you have a little bit of downtime, or you have admin time, or you have a coordinator that can handle that. So I think declines is a good place to look. Declines is a good place to start when hey, I don't have a vendor here. And
Yeah.
then this is an interesting, I'm sorry, this is the one part I think it's kind of critical. If you don't want to just have a broker or somebody listed in every spot, so that way if a work order goes out and there's no vendor ranked, it'll kind of go off into a black hole. Create an internal provider. It could be yourself, you could call it Smile Doctors Facilities Team, or Jason Nunn Facilities Manager, and rank yourself in every trade, at a higher number, maybe 10 or 20, depending on what your footprint looks like. And then you almost become the backstop. And so then that when a work order goes out and you have a void, it comes to you, and they're like, why is this coming to me? It shouldn't. And you realize it's a reminder, hey, we have a void.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I love systems. And of course, when you're managing hundreds of facilities across a large area, systems and formula, what do you use as a base vendor formula to cover down on your portfolio?
I find for me anyway, using Service Channel, I have what I call a 2x2x2 formula, and that's two local vendors ranked 1 and 2, two regional vendors ranked 3 and 4, and a broker or 1 or 2 brokers ranked 5 and 6. So a 2x2x2, you got 2 local, 2 regional, 2 brokers, and I think it's a really good formula for any trade in any one of your clinics and any one of your locations. Excuse me, we have clinics from the ortho world, but whether the restaurants, stores, or whatever you're referring to them as, I think that's a really good formula.
Cool. Okay. So one last question, maybe a little more difficult subject, but when we talk about vendors who are non-compliant and aren't delivering on what they need to, how do you manage that?
Compliance is a big part, and I think a lot of times it's an area that gets neglected. I'm really proud of the compliance section. I at least spend an hour a day in the compliance section, and that right now allows me. I think we're operating with well over 300 vendors, and we're 90% compliant. And when it comes to compliant, that means that the insurance is up to date, it's current. All the emails are there, all the necessary documents are checked off, and everything is in place. But you do have to spend time in there. I find a lot, well, at least, in my opinion, if anytime I've ever entered a new role and I sit there and I look at the compliance section, generally it's been neglected. There's maybe 90% incomplete profiles or 90% missing insurance. I don't think you want to get caught up in that as a good facilities manager. You've got to spend a little time a day getting in there and saying, okay, let me identify 10 vendors that I need insurance. Send them out an email, give them a call and say, hey, can you get your insurance in there, and things like that. I think if you're doing that, you're really doing a great service to your organization. That way, when something comes up, everything's covered.
Great. Well, Jason, so great to meet you virtually. We're going to see you soon. And before I let our audience go, remember, we're going to be in Grapevine at the Gaylord Texan for our national conference. A bunch of FMs like Jason are going to be there. A great exhibition floor. It's our marquee event of the year. And so that's ConnexFM 2023. Jason, that's your daily grind for today. Thank you so much again for your insight. We'll talk to you soon. For audience out there, that's your daily grind. Have a good one.